Hey, it's Soul here with round 2 of my reaction to Dragonflight Professions, which maybe by the end this will still be almost as long, maybe longer than the round 1. Anyway, the other day there was a detailed blog from the World of Warcraft team sharing what they have to share about what is to come. So I've had a day or so to kind of marinate over it, and I want to share some additional thoughts on specifically the part on crafting epic gear to compete with or complement endgame gearing in this expansion. You know, what's the good and the bad, and do I have any suggested fixes? Because a lot of people have a lot of reaction to this. Not all of them are good, and well, I'm not sure if we have a shared understanding here, you know, or shared comprehension here. In fact, maybe I'm wrong, okay? So even if you disagree with my takes, I would like to hear your counterpoints, and, you know, I want to keep my mind open. And in case you didn't look at my reading of the entire blog, you can check the link in the description, you know, or somewhere up here, because there is a lot of information to go through, not just crafting epic stuff. So if you don't mind, like the video, subscribe for more Dragonflight coverage, and let's get to the blog breakdown. So the blog writes, in Dragonflight you will find many recipes for extremely powerful craftable equipment. In fact, every primary crafting profession can craft one or more pieces, all of which work under a shared system with the following, you know, yada yada yada. So every primary crafting profession. So, you know, not just the usual suspects, but the likes of inscription and engineering will be able to craft gear. Now that's nothing new. And unsurprisingly, well, blacksmiths will be able to make more plate armor pieces than alchemy will. Not all professions are going to be treated equally here, but we can expect the likes of offhands from scribes, I guess, goggles for engineers, and the good old alchemy trinkets for alchemists. Up to 5 of these crafted pieces can be equipped at once, the blog says, with two-handed weapons counting as 2. Right. That's pretty jacked up if you're a Fury Warrior, right? But 5 crafted pieces, it is a significant amount. This offers a lot of flexibility compared to most previous expansions that were a lot more restricted, like Warlords of Draenor with only 3 pieces, or they were inflexible like with Shadowlands legendaries. Imagine as a Mythic Raider or a Keystone dungeon person, like you're already pretty well geared out and all that, you're trying to fill out a few more slots, but that right piece just isn't dropping. So setting aside trinkets maybe, that's gonna be up to 5 slots that you can use to fill gaps in your gearing. There's tier set pieces to consider, but for now, we don't need to distract ourselves with that, and it's a different story altogether for those of us who don't participate in the big 3, organized raids, dungeons, and PvP. I did share a big concern regarding these screenshots here that lightly suggest that crafters like blacksmiths may not be able to craft gear for every available slot, that it's limited to what we see here. Now, I'm going to try not to worry about that so much because it is just a screenshot, but I wanted to point this out and share some concerns. I know I'd be pretty unhappy if I, as a blacksmith, that I can't even craft a full set of gear. For now though, we're going to move on. So back to the blog. All of them start at an item level range near to normal raids, increasing with quality. Through earned optional reagents, they can be bought up to heroic and even mythic raid item levels, making them competitive with some of the best gear that you can find. So this is what we heard the WoW team talk about in their initial talks about professions, which left me impressed, but also like, there's gonna be a catch, right? I already mentioned the equip limit of 5, and then there is this next bullet point. All are soulbound, so you'll either need to craft them yourself or have someone craft them for you through a crafting order. Now this is one of the bullet points that's got folks pretty worked up. A lot of folks would love to simply buy gear from the market as if there were raid BOEs out there. And I've got a good feeling that's like every other expansion before Dragonflight, there will in fact be raid level BOEs or world drops and stuff like that. I mentioned my worry that Dragonflight will only make a select few slots available for crafting, and I hope that BOEs don't conflict with these crafted gear slots, but once again, it's a very small concern. It's just a detail that I don't want people to ignore either. So personally, because of how much you can customize a piece of gear between item level quality and secondary slots, and the work that would go into making just one of these things, I'm kind of glad that they're making them soulbound, because it would sure suck to make a piece of gear that's, hey, you post it and no one ends up wanting it. I do have concerns about how add-ons will play into the work order process, but that's going to be a conversation that's really far down the line, and once we really get our hands on this. Now let's get into the more controversial parts of the Dragonflight Profession blog, so strap in. From the blog post it reads, each piece of crafted equipment will require several types of soulbound reagents that you will need in order to craft it and improve it further with optional reagents. Lots of folks out there don't like soulbound reagents. I mean, to certain extents, I don't either, because it sucked during, say, Battle for Azeroth, when folks had a bunch of Sanguicell or Tidal Core or whatever those were called, but they couldn't do anything with them. But that's why I like these crafting orders. It gives an outlet for these items, and it gives a little bit more meaning to those otherwise unused items. But what this threatens to do, at least so far, is to kind of compromise the idea of gearing up an alt through crafting. I'm going to get into this concern a little bit more later when I give more direct feedback and suggestions, but back to the blog. One type of reagent will come from various challenging activities, including dungeons, raids, PvP, and adventuring in some, quote, dangerous outdoor areas. You will need to earn a fair amount of this reagent to craft a piece of equipment, and more for significant pieces. I'm thinking the difference between a cloak and a chest piece, perhaps. You could also use this reagent to construct an optional reagent to bring this equipment up to around heroic raid item level. So the farming part here, I think it's good. I like this very deterministic path towards creating bona fide heroic item level gear. Because think back to Shadowlands, when we could wear one piece of gear that was almost heroic item level gear. In Dragonflight, it's going to be about 5 pieces. It's only 5 pieces, sure, but we can't just say that this is the only source of high-end gear outside of the big 3. Like Zereth Mortis and Shadowlands, that offered close to normal raid gear. There are world bosses, and there's the creation catalyst. So if nothing else, what we're going to see in Dragonflight feels like a step up. The issue I see here lies again with the alt friendliness. I mean, sure, my main is going to be working, whatever it is to get access to these heroic and higher level pieces, but what about my alts? According to the blog, a second type of reagent will come from a series of quests that award you enough to craft one piece of equipment. Additional stages of these quests will become available to everyone every few weeks. Now, this is time gating, kind of. Well, kind of, sort of. I'm speculating here, but this gives off the same vibe as the creation catalyst. In this case, there's going to be a quest line, with quests being available every few weeks, according to the blog. Meaning every few weeks, each character will get the goods that they need to craft one piece of gear. So let's apply some of this creation catalyst logic here. We're well into the season, for example, and my main completed 3 stages of the quest line after so many weeks or a month or something like that. And then let's say that we have an alt that just hit max level. So my alt should have access to all 3 of these stages right away, and now just needs to farm up whatever other reagents to get gear crafted or to craft it themselves. Now that works. However, this is a thing that paces the rate at which Dragonflight epic gear is being created. So I wonder what the economic impact will be on week 1 when these quests are first available, and then the market is just slammed with all this demand. Although actually before that, what can crafters make before that? Because, well, no one's going to have access to these required materials, right? So the when of this availability is going to be very important too. Now, by sheer principle alone, this kind of puts a weird taste in my mouth because, well, the man, the invisible hand, is deciding how useful or how available this crafted gear is. For better or worse, though, the World of Warcraft team designs its features carefully considering how people of all playstyles are going to approach it. So far this feels much more tightly controlled than, say, reagents that needed the good old daily or 3-day cooldowns, but the nature of it is also a passive easing of restrictions that is, I think, kind of alt-friendly, because later in the season, alts or players that are coming in later will have easier access to these pieces, and the people that already have it will hopefully not feel so bad. We just need to consider the other farmable reagents mentioned earlier, the ones that are earned from the big three and dangerous outdoor content. Maybe those reagents can be made account-wide, like I forgot what the materials are called, but it comes from the protoform synthesis feature in Zereth Mortis. So this paints a picture of the WoW team's intentions. Like, they want you out in the world, beating up bad guys, exploring, so you can obtain these special materials that crafters need, or if you happen to be the crafter, but stuff that you need in order to make the gear. What turns me off a little bit, though, is that non-crafters are kind of going out of their way to make their own crafted gear and the crafter is just they're just kind of waiting for someone to show up. Moving on and back to the blog, to upgrade this equipment to around Mythic Raid item level, you will need to acquire a final reagent that can only be obtained in the highest tiers of content, Mythic Raids, the highest levels of Mythic Plus, and highly rated PvP. So just double checking, are we talking about plus 15s or plus 20s? But whatever the case though, this has got some folks pretty tilted as well. It basically means for non-Big 3 players, access to Mythic level crafted gear is all but blocked off. Now to be fair, this doesn't apply to the crafters themselves, they're fine, and because these and all the other materials, all of that is coming to them. The value of the crafter is less about their shrewdness about obtaining materials and more about their skill level, their specialization, and the crafting gear stats or whatever to let them make stuff that people want. My opinion though, given all of these requirements, I don't see why Mythic level gear couldn't be accessible for everyone eventually, because there are systems in place, I think, to make it work for those who don't play in high-end content without stepping on the toes of endgame players. So let's read the rest of this blog section. Philosophically, the goal of this system is to have professions be a meaningful source of high-end gear, elevating the importance and value of professions. As a crafter, you'll need to go to significant effort to gain the skill, specialization, and recipes necessary to craft this gear, but it should be well worth it. As a user of this gear, you will also need to go out and acquire many of the reagents yourself. The soulbound reagents are designed to provide a means of deterministic, incremental progress towards gear of your choice while doing the activities of your choice. In addition, the quest-acquired reagent mentioned above will limit how quickly you can acquire high-end crafted gear. This will prevent it from overwhelming other sources of gear while giving you the freedom to choose from where and how quickly you want to acquire the other reagents. So I get it when folks come at this and think, dude, this is like way too complicated, like, hey Blizz, just throw up a bunch of recipes and put them behind like daily cooldowns and, just keep it simple. The thing is, compared to other MMOs and what WoW has been doing and what Dragonflight is going to do, their crafting is still pretty simple. But there's going to be continuous debate over why Mythic level gear can only be accessed via Mythic level means. There are strong arguments on both sides with really good points. And the way I see it, the WoW team is trying really hard to create this experience that is different from the big three experience, but also, and this is super important, doesn't step on anyone's toes. We've seen how sensitive people get when it comes to what I call the gearing economy. Like in early Shadowlands, PvP gearing was the way to go. It totally altered player behavior at the competitive level, which influenced players who were trying to get into that space too. Since Mythic Plus even became a thing, it's been the fastest way to gear for PvE content, much more reliable than raiding in most cases. What the WoW team is trying to do here is very thoughtful with respect to the different ways players are able to gear. I think it's going in the right direction. It's also flawed though, and I do have some broad suggestions to make that can only go so far because I'm basing my feedback as, just a reaction to a blog post and not testable content that I'd be able to test. So first, alt friendliness, I mentioned this earlier. In order to make these high-level pieces of gear, we need up to 3 kinds of reagents. One is obtained via this periodic quest / time gating, another from outside farming of other content including world content, and the last from late game content if you want to turn those heroic pieces into mythics. Now it's going to suck for alts coming in late to have to deal with that entire farming process, so I feel that these soulbound reagents should actually be account bound. The time-gated reagents can stay as is because, as I understand it, everyone is going to have easy access to those and may already, well, it already has a built-in catch-up. It just wasn't specifically stated in the blog, and I hope it is later. By making these reagents otherwise account bound or account wide, it means that the work that we've put in on our mains isn't going to just languish in some currency UI, and we can work towards giving our alts a good head start. Work orders or crafting orders, in the meantime, are very cool from the standpoint that it's a way to remotely interact with the crafting community. But I think that there should be a live or a direct crafting order UI as well, in case my guildmate is online and standing next to me. Now sure, my guildmate can set up a crafting order themselves with a 0 gold commission that's targeted at me. And there was a mention of a crafting area with crafting tables in Valdrakken, that's the name of the player hub. Whether that's meant to be the place to also do direct crafter to client interactions remains to be seen, and I just wanted to bring this up anyway. Next, I don't think that two-handed weapons should count as 2 crafted items. That's really unfair for like a Fury Warrior. So instead, I would say have separate equip limits for these pieces of gear. So for example, you can only have 1 two-handed weapon on your person, or you can have 2 one-handed weapons. And then there will be like a separate armor equip limit of 4 armor pieces. Now that does sound convoluted now that I've said it out loud, but you're also hearing it for the first time, much like this entire profession blog post. So I think the too complicated argument, it only takes you so far, while the hands-on learning curve is probably not going to be so bad once you experience it the first time. Now I do think that crafting mythic pieces should be available for everyone. The blog post suggests that there's already a lot that's going to go into crafting gear, period. Accessing mythic gear only requires players to participate in content that already drops this gear, which makes obtaining it feel a little bit less epic, and I am putting aside what is on the onus of the crafter themselves. I can also accept the need to balance accessibility with fair and reasonable pacing. Making mythics too accessible would tank the demand for anything that's not mythic, right? It would consume more resources, driving the price of materials up, and suddenly we get people talking about, ooh, the WoW token and pay to win, and they're conversations that really don't contribute anything at all. I don't have any specific ideas on this particular point because we don't know what endgame outside of the big 3 is going to be like. I mean, maybe certain activities and outdoor content can drip feed mythic level reagents, similar to whatever quest reagents are being made available every few weeks to make heroic gear, but that could easily cause the same economic problems I just mentioned. All in all, though, I'm still pretty happy about the direction that professions are going in World of Warcraft and in Dragonflight. It's obviously got its rough edges, with folks like me speaking for the community as if I know what you're thinking. And I hope that my suggestions help to spark a conversation, or maybe even a change. The team did add a lot of layers that seem complicated, but if WoW Professions did launch with a system like this back in 2004, we would have just grown into this, and there'd be something else to complain about. I get that. I get the big picture of what they're trying to do, but there are going to be lots of pushback from individual segments of the community who will be like, what about us? So this is going to be a ride. And I am grateful. I thank you for listening. I know this feedback was like super all over the place, but I'm grateful you made it to the end. So if you don't mind, like the video so I can keep doing Dragonflight coverage and feedback. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you later. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.